Good morning. Good morning. It's a little bit later than I usually get out. 3:19. I went to church last night, so I guess that's a pretty good reason to be starting my journey out a little bit later, or maybe that's just an excuse that I give myself. And I'll tell you something. You got to be careful with them excuses because they're a lot like cookies. You went for one, and next thing you know, you ate the whole bag. And if you know anything about cookies, you know that those aren't no good for you because they don't do nothing but add weight to you. They're empty calories. There's no nutritional value to them other than mentally. They make you feel really good, but after you eat them, if you have a conscience, they really don't do anything. We made it to church, we made it to service, and I remember the message I had sent Ricky yesterday, and I said, I'm going to service. I said, I'm going to pick up Sanaya and Silas, and then I am going to service. That's specifically how I said it. I didn't say, do you want to go? Are you going to go? I left that up to her to decide for herself. And she messaged me back and said, yeah. She says, hey, I'd like to go, etc., etc., etc. So long story short, we make it into church. And if you look at the majority of my posts, if you look at the majority of my videos, stuff I do on social media, it looks like it's really positive, and there's absolutely nothing. Either I live the most perfect life or I am lying. Well, I don't live the most perfect life, and I'm not a liar. I think the majority of my problems are always talked out inside of my videos, because you're not able to do over 300 plus 400, 500, 600 videos and not have experienced something. So last night we went to church, and somewhere along the line I had did something, and I see how she took it. I didn't necessarily tell her I understood or seen it, but when we came out, she called me a dick, and she didn't necessarily call me, and that's kind of crazy. You come out of church and this is the conversation you're having, but she didn't call me a dick. She spelled it. She said D-I-C-K. Right? I think it's not necessarily about the problems you have, because I don't know that anybody is above issues. You're not above the issues that happen to every living creature. Hell, even the dog has a hard time licking his ass every once in a while. It's how you deal with it. So we come out of church, and I'm not going to paint the picture like, well, Ricky, come out of church, fresh out the door. It's Wednesday night, fresh out the door, and she cussing up a storm. That's not how it went. I had did something that provoked a reaction, and that's usually how the problem starts. And then it snowballs into a point where somebody has to say I'm sorry, or it has to become this big old drawn out situation. I walked away. One is I didn't respect the fact that I was being called something that I didn't think I was. I didn't evaluate the situation long enough to see it from her standpoint. I simply seen it from my standpoint. my posts, my videos, is my perspective. It's how I really see things. It's how I really deal with things. If there's deals inside of my transaction getting ready to fall apart, I don't feed into it. You might call me my transaction coordinator, my assistant might call me, my LO might call me, and they might say, hey, this is a problem with this, and you know, there's no cure in sight. Well, we gotta get it done. Yeah, but well, we gonna get it done. What's the option? See, I'm one of those people. I don't feel like time invested is time wasted. So why would I treat something that I've given my energy to as if something I can just toss away at the moment that it doesn't go the way I want it? See, because we put hear me on this, because we put so much value on money over time, we're willing to break off relationships with people who owe us money, but yet we won't cut them same people loose who waste our time. One you can get back, the other one you can't. So yeah, inside my business, when somebody comes to me and says, hey, we have a problem, hey, we'll get it done. We have time invested in it, which means we have the most precious commodity that we have access to. We can't waste any of it. If you ever looked at a video of Fort Knox or the Federal Gold Reserve, they have all black floors everywhere because when they're doing something with the gold, I forgot the name of it, and maybe somebody who's watching this video in 20 years from now, it's 2018 right now, because that's how long it takes somebody to catch up to what it is I'm saying. But when they're doing the when they're moving the ore around of the gold, and they're moving it around, and they're forming it into its bricks, they move it with these big clamps, and they move it, and then they pour it into its form. But they got these black mats all over the place because they want to preserve every drop of gold that could hit the ground. They know that it will show up brightest if it's on something of a black surface. See, they go through so much time and energy to make sure that they can reserve every single drop of it. And some people won't do that with time. So me and my wife, we get into this, I'm not even going to say an argument, because at the time that I got called the name, one, I didn't understand why she had said it. I do now. And I get it. I get it where she was coming from, how she's seeing things. But I didn't want to give the time to that. I don't want to give the time to the thought of my deal not going through. It's easier for me to just say it will work out and move on. I much rather speak that into it than feed into, oh, well, this is the problem. We all know what the problem is. Hell, the damn thing ain't closed yet. The deal ain't closed. We know there's a problem. That's the obvious fact. Right? That's the obvious fact. Don't tell me obvious. I've lost really good jobs working with some really good investors because I didn't understand the fact that they didn't need the obvious. They're not paying me for the obvious. They're paying me to do something that's above and beyond the obvious. They're paying me for a perspective that is different and outside of their comprehension and understanding. Time. You get paid for your time. So you're not above. Nobody's above. President Obama's not above. He's not even the president. President Trump is not above an argument with his wife. He's not above an issue. Jesus was not above an issue. He had to go up inside the temple. He had to go up inside of the place of worship. He had to turn over the tables of the tax collectors and the bill collectors and the gamblers. He had to go in there. He had to act a fool. But just because an issue come up, and this is why I'm not going to put a whole lot of emphasis and a whole lot of conversation on the fact of the problem. Why? Let's be very clear. We all got them. But if I have to be specific, well, I got called a dick. I probably was being one. Okay, and I don't have it figured out. Matter of fact, I like not having it all figured out. It makes life interesting. Why would I want to figure it out? What am I trying to be on the level of God? You know, I like roller coasters. I legitimately like roller coasters. The bigger the roller coaster, the scarier the roller coaster. I like it. That's me. That's my little thing. Matter of fact, I'm thinking about jumping out of an airplane with an oxygen tank. That's how high I want to go. I like the thrill. But let me ask you this. Imagine the thrill of jumping out of a plane, or imagine the thrill of a roller coaster being taken away by the obvious knowing of the lefts, the rights, the ups, the downs, the speed, the velocity at which you're going to take each one of these turns at. Imagine it just being the same all the time, and you being able, you've ridden the ride so much that you already got it figured out. How fun would that be? See, I say this because sometimes arguing with my wife is one of the best reasons to make up with my wife. Maybe it makes sex better, right? Maybe it does. But maybe you should keep something in perspective. It's time. It's time consuming. And you need to start switching up your perspective on things if you ever want them to at least come to a point of maybe not necessarily the same problem, but a different one. Because if you don't change how you think, you find yourself bumping into the same situation over and over and over and over and over again with no possible change in sight, and some people will just die that way. So consider, I'm not without problems. You're not ever going to be without problems. And then just consider Then are you quicker to cut somebody off who owes you money and slower to cut somebody off who wastes your time? Consider where you place your value at. Consider where your perspective is drawn from. And then I'd have you consider the fact that maybe it's not the fact that I don't have problems that might annoy you, but maybe the fact that you haven't learned that your problem is not what you think it is. I'll tell you this before I go. I'm sitting there and I'm speaking with my teacher, and we're sitting there on the ground, and we're talking about my foot and the injury and whatnot. And by the way, they said that it's there's some swelling, there's some tissue tear, but I mean not tear, but some tissue stress, but nothing big. And I'm like, wow, that's huge because I can be back running fairly quick. But we're sitting there talking, and we're talking about how funny the body is, and how you can have a problem on this side of your body, and it's completely unrelated to what's happening here, but it's somewhere over here. I remember doing needling sessions, and they'd put this little needle inside of you and they'd move it around. The intention was to move the little muscle fibers all around and try to straighten something out. I don't know if that's an exact science. It helped. It's a little freaky. But I have you consider that the problem that you think is in your hand is probably something that's coming from your right foot. We all got problems. What separates me from the rest of you is, dude, I done looked up at problems all my damn life. I done looked up at a problem all my life. Whenever my mama walked out on me, I looked up at a problem. From the moment that the first woman my daddy was with that moved out and took everything, I was looking up at a problem. Took my toys too. And that happened a couple times. To going to school and getting into fights. My kids ain't never been in no damn fight. I don't know if they can fight. Maybe silence them into fight. But I've always been looking up at a problem. I'm just too old to deal with it right now. And I understand that the same way that those people take care of that gold to make sure that they're protecting every drop that hits the ground, and at the end of the day they come through and they sweep up the little gold flakes and then melt that down and get another brick. Well, that's the same way that I'm paying attention to my time. And whether I did something to provoke being called a dick, or whether I done did something to provoke somebody blowing their horn at me, or whatever the problem may have been, or whatever it is that I have done, or whatever's going on in my business, I choose to have a perspective that fits the way that I want to live my life and the way that I want it to play out. I don't fall into the trap of let's do this. And even though me and my wife, we've went rounds and we've had our arguments and we do that, we not above that. We not above that. I don't know that you ever get above that unless you some passive aggressive couple. Oh, well, I don't feel this way, and I don't feel like, I don't feel this way, and I don't feel that way, and now sometimes we argue it out. But keep it in perspective. Because it's time we talking about. And once you know everything ain't perfect, then it's okay to have those situations. You just ain't got to glorify them. You just have to put a proper perspective on them.